Okay, so I got this London game here. Um, my opponent plays d4, so I get my knight on f6 and my pawn on d5. So this is the London. I play c5 and get my queen out early. Now I'm attacking this b2 square. What he should do is he should bring his knight out to c3, because if I ever take on b2, that would be a mistake, because he ends up getting b5 with his knight. His knight can come to b5, threatening to fork my rook, and also my queen very likely in that position would end up getting trapped, because he's gonna, with his knight here on c3, he can also just push his pawn forward. He can bring his queen over, protecting the a3 pawn, and then he can slide his rook over, and my queen is going to end up trapped if you're not careful. So it's really not a good idea to take on b2 if his knight's on c3. So but he doesn't do that in the game. He just plays b3. First, now that b2's not threatened anymore, I'm going to take on this center pawn, because my position is really not set up to handle him taking. I'm going to have to take back with the queen, and my position is going to be very awkward with my queen on c5. So I get rid of this c pawn. He takes back with the knight. I guess he should have taken with the queen. And I should have played knight b to d7, threatening to fork him here. And I did have that idea. I forgot that my knight was actually attacked in this position, and I was planning on trying to fork him. So that was my thinking here. But also, I'm very happy to just trade pieces. I like my position. When he plays this a3 move, I thought it was very suspicious, and I ended up playing a5 with the idea. I really thought he's going to block with the pawn, and that's a huge mistake if he does. And I was kind of baiting him into it, and he ended up falling for it. He did play b4. And in that position, you can just take with the bishop, because if he takes back, he's losing his rook. And he ended up, actually the best move for him actually probably was to lose the rook. Just lose down the exchange. Because if his knight comes over to d2, then I'm just completely attacking d2. And there's no rush to do it either, because right now, first of all, his rook is protected. So I am threatened. He is threatening to take my bishop, so I can just move it forward. Now wherever he goes to move his rook, I'm just going to bring my knight into e4 and triple attack the d2 square. So he moves his rook, and I get e4. He attacks my knight, and I take, and I just trade all our pieces. In this instance, actually, the computer's saying it's not such a good idea to actually take immediately, because you can just keep this pressure on the rook. There's no sense in just trading it, but I'm very happy to just go into an endgame right now, because I'm going to win. In this position, I'm just going to win. So I decided to just trade pieces and play bishop to a6, with the idea that if he ever takes this pawn in the center, I'm going to just trade off all of our pieces. He does have both bishops right now, which is very powerful. And I would like to trade off this light square bishop if possible, because then he's just going to have a dark square bishop, and I can take advantage of that. I can set up my structure to better handle his dark square bishop. But when he has both the light square and the dark square, it can be very dangerous for me. Even though I have two rooks, it's very hard to keep those. It's going to be hard to keep those rooks protected while he has both his bishops. So he actually does take, and also that allows me to get a better pawn in the center too. Instead of having this really weak c pawn, it becomes this really powerful d5 pawn. But first I'm going to take the bishop. The computer actually says he actually shouldn't have even taken back. He should just take this e6 pawn. But then I would take on g2, threatening the rook, and I'm threatening the f3 pawn. So I don't know what the computer's thinking here, but I mean, he's got to try something, I guess. But I don't like this the idea of taking on e6. Maybe there's some other idea behind it, but yeah. So when he takes back, I'm going to take back with my c-pawn. What he's probably thinking at this point is maybe he's going to cut off my king from castling, but I actually don't want to castle in this position because he only has 2 pieces left. There's nothing left to even threaten my queen, especially if I'm on a light square, because then only his rook is going to threaten my king, and I feel like I'm very safe even on the center of the board with my pawn structure the way it is. So I'm attacking his bishop, so he has to move, and that allows me to get my a5 pawn pushed up a little further. I'm going to attack the bishop, just harass it a little bit. So he's just made a bunch of bishop's moves. His last 1, 2, 3, 4 moves have been bishop moves, and I've just been getting in a better position the entire time. Here he's attacking g7, so I just push to g6, and he goes on the b file, but I'm gonna actually not allow him to come onto the b file. I'm very happy to trade rooks in this position, and I'm gonna get my a pawn to a light square where he can never attack it. He can never come over here and attack this, especially with my rook cutting off his king. So in this position, he just completely blunders and puts his bishop in front of his king. His king is very far away from me. He's 2 squares. He'd have to move 1, 2, 3 squares to protect this. So yeah, rook to c8 just wins the bishop, and he resigned here. And that was my London game today. I played with 96% accuracy, so that's pretty cool. Some of my moves definitely weren't perfect. Like this knight move, I could have played knight to d7. It wants me to take back with the queen, which, I mean, it gets my queen onto the light squares. I like my queen on the dark squares because this king is on a dark square, but yeah, this probably wasn't the best move, but I definitely felt like he was gonna play b4. That's why I did it. I wanted to try and bait him into it, and he actually turned out really good for me because it ended up giving me a winning position. And here, of course, this is a very questionable move. I should have just not taken it. There's no rush to take this rook. I don't need to take it right now. If I just keep the tension right now, his queen is kind of tied down to his rook, so he really can't go anywhere with his queen. And I should have probably just castled at this point and maybe played bishop to a6 like I did at the end of the game. But I wanted to trade down pieces. I mean, I know I'm going to win in this position, so I don't want to give him too many chances either. So that was kind of my thinking there. I played the best moves here. It wants me to go on to the b file. I mean, at that point, I'm probably going to be checking him on b2 and maybe winning a pawn. And if he protects it, if he protects the b2 square, maybe I'm coming into b3, threatening to take on a3. Maybe that's the idea of immediately coming onto the b file. But moving this rook over, my thinking was my other rook wants to come on to b8. So if this rook is on b8, then this rook is not going to be able to come onto the c file, and I want both rooks on the open files. But I guess the computer thinks, like, be more aggressive and come up here and get some attacks going.